Microsoft. I'm not saying this is the way it is at every company. And clearly, as you go, I know that different companies define these roles in different ways. Well, heck, even Microsoft defines the role in different ways in different groups. So you can't even find a simple definition even at Microsoft. So but Microsoft certainly does not have a project manager job description. But which isn't to say that you won't find some program managers who are doing very much what you would find a project manager at another company doing, that's just job titles. So the classical program manager at Microsoft is a generalist. That's the classical definition. So and the generalist role does a lot of things. So all of those things I'd mentioned even on the previous slide of evangelism and all of that, in the classical definition of a PM, they do it all. They handle all aspects of that. So they need to understand the market, the customer's business requirements. So they need to be a business person. They create functional specifications for the product that they're building. They have to, so by understanding the market and customer requirements, you take that knowledge and you build specifications. This is what we need. You write down in very detailed documents, this is what we should be building. This is the types of things and capabilities that our product needs to have. And then also you need to manage schedules and keep things on track, which I would say is more traditional project management, of just managing the project. Are we on schedule? Are things going along fine? So you do that too. That's part of the classical definition of a program manager. And you coordinate the development and test teams. So the software developers, that's the development team, and the test team as well. But that gets kind of weird too, because testers are by and large software developers anyway these days. Because most testing is done through software automation. They write tools that test the software. So they're all developers, but there is a group of programmers whose specific function is to create code that you will sell, that will be the product. And there's another group of developers who create code whose only purpose is to test that software. So that's the difference between the tests. But in any event, the program manager's responsibility is to coordinate and synchronize both those teams, and they are the people who are actually doing the execution, making sure that the product is coming out. And you also, the program managers they report the status, which is part of this coordination. You've got to make sure everybody knows what everybody's doing, and you do tons and tons of communication, tons and tons of meetings, and tons of emails and status reports. This is the job of a program manager. And in fact, I think there's no program manager that doesn't have that in their job description. That's part of the job description of any PM, no matter whether you're in more of the specialized role or not. And you also, not only you're coordinating between just the immediate engineers that you work with in test and software development, you are also coordinating with other teams. You have to work with the marketing group. You have to work with the documentation team. Because you, as the program manager, it's your responsibility to make sure that everything succeeds with the product. Your job isn't done just by when the code is completed and it's being tested and it's being shipped on time. Your job is done when marketing is ready to sell that product, when the product support team is ready to answer questions from customers that call in with problems when it goes out the door. And you will be the one who they come to when that isn't ready. And if the sales force has problems selling the product, they will go to the PM. They will ultimately, it'll come down, they'll ask the PM, well, what happened? Wasn't this ready? So you've got to have all these balls in the air, juggling them all as you're going through the product cycle of your group. And so you have to coordinate all of these things. And you have, of course, you have to understand the big picture. You have to know what all the things are that need to happen. You can't just say, I'm only going to focus on getting the code done and making sure that happens or something. You got You have to understand all of the stuff that's important to make your product a success. What is it? And that goes all the way back to the beginning of understanding even the requirements, because you were the one whose butt was on the line to make sure that you were building the right features that customers would really want to have. So, I mean, ultimately, if the product doesn't sell well, and it turns out it's because you didn't have these 3 features that your competitors had, it's the PM's responsibility. He should have known that, or she should have known that, and made sure that those were features that were put into the product. And in a company, Microsoft is a big company. There's lots of resources in the company, so there are things you can leverage to do your job, which is a great thing about Microsoft. There is a marketing department. So when I say there's all these things you've got to keep juggling, it isn't to say you do them all. You don't have to write the documentation. You go to the documentation team. You don't have to do all of the research on everything. Marketing might be able to do some customer research for you. They might be able to give you some insights into what customers want. But it's your responsibility to make sure it happens. And there are always cases where there's holes, where marketing will say, we just don't have the resources to put into doing any research, market research for you. Well, you have to figure out how to get it done. And I myself I did lots of customer surveys. So that survey I did about Linux, although that had nothing to do with my day job, I was doing tons of surveys related to my day job that were directly related to that, because I was asking customers what they wanted. And in my case, in the networking team, marketing did not have a lot of time to spend with me. And Microsoft seems like a big company, and you think, oh, they make billions and billions of dollars. They can put resources onto anything. The reality is, when you really get on a micro level, you can find out that you can't get any help with things that you want to do. And there's a lot of examples I can come up with, but in the case of like IPv6, working with IPv6, or some of these Windows filtering platform things, which were APIs that developers who wanted to work with the network stack would use, marketing basically said, well, we only have so many product managers to help your engineering group, and those APIs aren't things that we ever sell to customers. They're not something that's a feature that we'll ever promote to a customer. Therefore, we can't justify putting the resources into helping do the investigation as to what those developers would want. So then that left the ball in my court to have to do pseudo marketing activities as best as I could to do that research. And so I'm just pointing out that you as a program manager, it's not good enough to say, well, they wouldn't help me, so I just didn't do any research. You need to come up with, I mean, there was other alternatives. I could have lobbied to get extra budget from my managers to go and hire some third-party place to go do research. These are all things you can try to do, but it's not so easy to get a lot of extra budget. Some people at Microsoft might know that's not so easy to do either. And again, though, the resource thing, I don't know has anybody ever heard of Radius? It's a network security authentication protocol to make sure that only really secure, that only the only people allowed on a network really have permission to be on a network. And in Windows Server, there's a Radius add-on or component in there, a Radius server that's a feature of Windows Server. And I was a program manager involved with that, and we were really, I think we had maybe one developer on that, on the Radius component, just one developer. And there was a competitor that we had that was a small company on the outside of Microsoft, and they had revenues of about $50 million a year, which is peanuts, but they had over 10 developers making their Radius server. And they were running circles around us with new features and things and we just couldn't even begin to compete with that. And so it's just interesting when you look at everybody thinks Microsoft is this big company that can do everything, but yet you'll find there's a lot of cases where you just can't do the things you want to do. And I think this is interesting from a program manager standpoint, because you take that example, you can say, well, why didn't I lobby to get the resources that I would need to do this? Well, one of the challenges that you face in Microsoft, particularly in Windows, I